August 14th, 1904, Volume 6. The more the blows of the cross knock the soul down, the more light she acquires. As I was a little in suffering, blessed Jesus on coming said to me, "My beloved daughter, the more the iron is beaten, the more light it acquires. And even if the iron did not have rust, the blows serve to keep it shiny and free of dust. So whoever comes close to that iron can easily reflect himself in it, as if it were a mirror." The same for the soul. The more the blows of the cross knock her down, the more light she acquires, and she maintains herself dusted of any slightest thing, in such a way that whoever comes close to her can reflect himself in her, as if she were a mirror. And naturally, being a mirror, she performs its office, to show whether faces are stained or clean, whether they are beautiful or ugly. Not only this, but I myself delight in going to reflect myself in her, and finding in her no dust, or any other thing that may prevent me from reflecting my image in her, I love her more and more. August 14th, 1908, Volume 8. The human will serves as brush for Jesus in order to portray his image in the heart. Having received communion, I could see the baby within my interior, as though looking for something important. And I said, "My pretty little one, what are you looking for with so much zeal?" And he said, "Daughter, I am looking for the brush of your will, to be able to portray my image in your heart. In fact, if you do not give me your will, I lack the brush to be able to portray myself freely in you. And just as your will serves as brush in my hands, love serves as colors, in order to impress the variety of colors of my image. Moreover, just as the human will serves as brush for me, my will serves as brush in the hands of the soul, in order to portray her image in my heart. In me, then, she will find abundant color of love for the variety of colors." August 14th, 1912, Volume 11. In order to forget ourselves, we must do each thing, not only because Jesus wants it, but because Jesus wants to do it within us. If he redeemed us with his passion, with his hidden life, he prepared the divine action for every human action. Finding myself in my usual state, my always adorable Jesus told me, "My daughter, in order for the soul to forget herself, she should do each thing which is necessary for her, as if Jesus wanted to do it within her. If she prays, she should say, 'It is Jesus who wants to pray, and I pray together with him.' If she has to work, Jesus wants to work. Jesus wants to walk. Jesus wants to take food. He wants to sleep. He wants to get up. He wants to enjoy himself. And so on for all other things of life, except for error. Only in this way can the soul forget herself. Not only will she do everything because I want it, but because I want to do them. They are necessary to me. Now one day I was working, and I thought to myself, how is it possible that Jesus works in me while I work? Does he really want to do this work? And Jesus, "Yes, I do. My fingers are in yours, and they work." My daughter, when I was on earth, didn't my hands lower themselves to work the wood, hammer the nails, and help my foster father Joseph in the smithing work? While I was doing that, with those very hands and with those fingers, I created souls and called other souls to the other life. I divinized all human actions. I sanctified them, giving a divine merit to each one of them. In the movements of my fingers I called in sequence all the movements of your fingers and those of others. And if I saw that they were doing them for me, or because I wanted to act within them, I continued my life of Nazareth in them, and I felt cheered by them for the sacrifices and the humiliations of my hidden life, giving them the merit of my own life. Daughter, the hidden life that I conducted in Nazareth is not taken into account by men, when in fact, after the Passion, nothing could benefit them more. By lowering myself to all those little actions and those acts which men exercise during their daily life, such as eating, sleeping, drinking, working, starting the fire, sweeping, and so forth, all acts which no one can do without, I made flow inside their souls a tiny divine coin of incalculable price. Therefore, if my passion redeemed them, my hidden life provided each human action, even the most insignificant one, with divine merit and with infinite value. Do you see? As you work, working because I want to work, my fingers flow within yours, and as I work in you with my creative hands, in this very instant, how many am I giving to the light of this world? How many others am I calling? How many others do I sanctify, correct, chastise, and so forth? Now you are with me creating, calling, correcting, and so forth. Therefore, just as you are not alone, neither am I alone in my work. Could I ever give you greater honor? Who can say all that I understood, and all the good that can be done for ourselves and for others, by doing things because Jesus wants to do them in us? My mind gets lost. Therefore I stop here. August 14th, 1915, Volume 11. The whole life and passion of Jesus are always in the act of offering support to Jesus and salvation to souls, but there is the need of those who would use them and offer them. Continuing in my usual state, Jesus just barely came. He was so tired and exhausted that he himself called me to kiss his wounds and dry his blood, which was flowing from each part of his most holy humanity. So after I went over all his members, making various adorations and reparations, my sweet Jesus, relieved and leaning on me, told me, "My daughter, my passion, my wounds, my blood, all that I did and suffered, everything is in continuous action in the midst of souls, as if I were operating and suffering at that very moment. They serve me as the supports on which I can lean, and on which souls can lean, so as not to fall into sin and be saved. Now, during these times of chastisements, I am like the person who lives up in the air, with no ground underneath, and between continuous blows. My justice knocks me from heaven, and creatures with their guilt from the earth. Now the more the soul remains around me, kissing my wounds, repairing me, offering my blood, in a word, redoing all that I did during the course of my life and my passion, the more supports she forms so that I can lean on them and not fall. And the larger the circle becomes in which souls find the support not to fall into sin and be saved. Do not get tired, my daughter, of being around me and of going over my wounds over and over again. I myself will administer the thoughts, the affections, the words, so that you may remain around me. Be faithful to me. Time is tight. Justice wants to display its fury, and creatures irritate it. It is necessary to multiply more supports, so do not fail the work. August 14th, 1917, Volume 12. Jesus did nothing other than give himself prey to the will of the Father. Difference between living resigned to the will of God and living in his will. As I was in my usual state, my sweet Jesus just barely came, passing by, and told me, "My daughter, I did nothing other than give myself prey to the will of the Father. Therefore, if I thought in the mind of the Father. If I spoke in the mouth and with the tongue of the Father. If I worked in the hands of the Father. I even breathed my breathing in him, and everything I did was ordered the way he wanted. Therefore I could say that I carried out my life in the Father, and that I was the bearer of the Father, because I enclosed everything in his will, and I did nothing by myself. My main point was the will of the Father, because I did not care about myself, nor did I interrupt my course because of the offenses I received. Rather, I kept flying more and more toward my center. Only then did my natural life end, when I fulfilled the will of the Father in everything. The same for you, my daughter. If you give yourself prey to my will, you will no longer have concerns for anything. The very privation of me, which torments you and consumes you so much, flowing in my will find support. My hidden kisses, my life in you, clothed with you. In your very heartbeat, you will feel mine, burning and sorrowful. And if you do not see me, you feel me. My arms hold you tightly. How many times you feel my motion, my refreshing breath, which refreshes your ardors. You do feel all this, and when you try to see who squeezed you, who breathes on you, and you do not see me, I smile at you. I kiss you with the kisses of my will, and I hide more within you, in order to surprise you again, and let you jump once more into my will. Therefore do not sadden me by afflicting yourself, but let me do. May the flight of my volition never cease in you, otherwise you would hinder my life within you. On the other hand, as you live in my will, I do not find any hindrance, and I make my life grow, and I carry out my life as I want. Now, out of obedience, I want to say a few words on the difference between living resigned to the divine will and living in the divine will. First, living resigned. According to my poor opinion, this means to be resigned to the divine will in everything, both in prosperous and in adverse circumstances. Seeing in everything the divine will, the order of the divine dispositions which the divine will has over all creatures, such that not even one hair can fall from our head if the Lord does not want it so. It seems to me like a good son, who goes wherever his father wants, and suffers whatever his father wants. Poor or rich, it is indifferent to him. He is happy just being what his father wants. If he receives or asks for an order to go somewhere to carry out some business, he goes only because his father wanted it so. But in the meantime, he has to take some refreshment, stop to rest, have some food, deal with people. Therefore he has to put much from his own will, even though he goes because his Father wanted it. However, in many things he finds himself in the circumstance of doing them by himself. So it may happen that he is far away from his Father for days, for months, without receiving specification of the will of his Father in all things. Therefore, for one who lives resigned to the divine will, it is almost impossible not to mix his own will with it. He will be a good son. However, he will not have the thoughts, the words, and the life of his Father fully portrayed within himself in everything. In fact, since he has to go, return, follow, and deal with people, love is already broken, because only a continuous union makes love grow, and it never breaks. And the current of the will of the Father is not in continuous communication with the current of the will of the Son. During those intervals, the Son may get used to doing his own will. However, I believe that this is the first step toward sanctity. Second, living in the divine will. I would like the hand of my Jesus to write this. He alone could say all the beauty, the goodness, and the sanctity of living in the divine will. I am not capable. I have many concepts in my mind, but I lack the words. My Jesus, pour yourself into my word, and I will say what I can. Living in the divine will means being inseparable, doing nothing by oneself, because in the face of the divine will, one feels incapable of anything. He does not ask for orders, nor does he receive them, because he feels incapable of going by himself. So he says, "If you want me to do this, let us do it together. And if you want me to go, let us go together." Therefore he does all that his Father does. If the Father thinks, he makes the thoughts of the Father his own, and does not add one thought to those of his Father. If the Father looks, if he speaks, if he works, if he walks, if he suffers, if he loves, he too looks at what the Father is looking at. He repeats the words of the Father. He works with the hands of the Father. He walks with the feet of the Father. He suffers the same pains of the Father. And he loves with the love of the Father. He lives inside his Father, not outside of him. Therefore he is the reflection and the perfect portrait of his Father, which is not for the one who lives only resigned. It is impossible to find this Son without his Father, nor the Father without him. And not only externally, but all his interior is as though interwoven with the interior of the Father, transformed, dissolved completely in God. Oh, the rapid and sublime flights of this child in the divine will! This divine will is immense. In every instant, it circulates within everyone. It gives life and order to everything. And the soul, wandering within this immensity, flies to all, helps all, loves all, but as Jesus himself helps and loves, which cannot be done by one who lives only resigned. Therefore one who lives in the divine will finds it impossible to do things by himself. Even more, he feels nausea for his human works, though holy, because in the divine will all things, even the smallest ones, take on a different look. They acquire nobility, splendor, divine sanctity, divine power, and beauty. They multiply to infinity, and in one instant one does everything. And after he has done everything, he says, "I have done nothing. Jesus did." And this is all my contentment, that miserable as I am, Jesus gave me the honor to keep me in the divine will, to let me do what he himself has done. Therefore the enemy cannot bother this child, whether he has done well or badly, little or much, because Jesus himself did everything, and he together with Jesus. He is the most peaceful one. He is not subject to anxiety. He loves no one and loves everyone, but divinely. One can say that he is the repeater of the life of Jesus, the organ of his voice, the heartbeat of his heart, the sea of his graces. True sanctity, I believe, consists only in this. All other things are shadows, larvae, specters of sanctity. In this divine will, virtues take their place in the divine order, while outside of it, in the human order, they are subject to self-esteem, to vainglory, to passions. Oh, how many good works, how many attended sacraments are to be cried over before God, and to be repaired, because they are empty of divine will, and therefore without fruits. Heaven willing that all would understand true sanctity. Oh, how all other things would disappear. So many find themselves on the false way of sanctity. Many place it in the pious practices of piety, and woe to those who move them. Oh, how they deceive themselves. If their wills are not united with Jesus and transformed in him, which is the continuous prayer, with all of their pious practices, their sanctity is false. And it shows how these souls pass very easily from pious practices to defects, to amusements, to the sowing of discord and other things. Oh, how dishonoring this kind of sanctity is! Others place it in going to church, in attending all the services, but their will is far from Jesus. And it shows how these souls have little care for their own duties. And if they are hindered, they get angry. They cry that their sanctity goes up in the air. They complain. They disobey. They are the wounds of families. Oh, what a fake sanctity! Others place it in frequent confessions, in scrupulous spiritual directions, and having scruples for everything. But they do not have any scruple if their will does not run together with the will of Jesus, and woe to those who contradict them. These souls are like inflated balloons. A little hole is enough for the air to come out, and their sanctity goes up in smoke and falls to the ground. These poor balloons always have something to say. They are mostly inclined to sadness. They live always in doubt, and therefore would like to have a director for themselves, who would advise them, give them peace, and console them in every little thing. But they are soon more agitated than before. Poor sanctity, how forged it is! I would like the tears of my Jesus in order to cry together with him over these false sanctities, and make everyone know how true sanctity is in doing the divine will and in living in the divine volition. This sanctity puts its roots so deeply that there is no danger that it may oscillate, because it fills heaven and earth and finds its support everywhere. This soul is firm, not subject to inconstancies or voluntary defects. She is attentive to her duties. She is the most sacrificed and detached from everyone and everything, even from spiritual directions themselves. And since her roots are deep, she rises up so high that the flowers and fruits bloom in heaven. She is so hidden in God that the earth sees little or nothing of this soul. The divine will keeps her absorbed within itself. Only Jesus is the author, the life, the form of the sanctity of this enviable creature. She has nothing of her own, but everything is in common with Jesus. Her passion is the divine will. Her characteristic is the will of her Jesus, and Fiat is her continuous motto. On the other hand, the poor and false sanctity of the balloons is subject to continuous inconstancies, and while it appears that the balloons of their sanctity swell up so much as to seem to be flying in the air at a certain height, to the point that many, and even their directors, are amazed, soon they are disillusioned. One humiliation, one favor of the directors towards someone else is enough to deflate these balloons, because they see this as a theft against them, considering themselves the neediest. So while having scruples for silly things, they then reach the point of disobeying. Jealousy is the woodworm of these balloons, which, consuming the good they do, keeps sucking air from them, and the poor balloon deflates and falls to the ground, reaching the point of dirtying itself with earth. Then the sanctity that was in the balloon appears, and what can one find in it? Love of self, resentment, passions, hidden under the aspect of good, almost to have the occasion to say. They have become the amusement of the devil. So of all their sanctity nothing was found but a mass of defects, apparently disguised as virtues. But then who can say everything? Only Jesus knows the worst evils of this fake sanctity, of this devout life without foundation, because it leans on false piety. These fake sanctities are spiritual vines without fruit, sterile, and cause of who knows how much crying for my lovable Jesus. They are the ill feeling of society, the worry of very directors, and of families. One can say that they bring with themselves a noxious air that harms everyone. Oh, how so very different is the sanctity of the soul who lives in the divine will. These souls are the smile of Jesus. They are far away from everyone, even from the very directors. Only Jesus is everything for them. Therefore nobody worries for them. The beneficial air which they possess embalms everyone. They are the order and the harmony of everyone. Jesus, jealous of these souls, becomes actor and spectator of whatever they do. There is not one heartbeat, breath, or thought which he does not regulate and dominate. Jesus keeps this soul so absorbed in the divine will that she can hardly remember that she is living in exile. August 14th, 1924, Volume 17, The Wheel of the Soul in the Divine Will. Everything Jesus does is crown and guard of the creature. I was thinking to myself, I would like to always go around in His divine will. I would like to be like a wheel of the clock which always rotates without ever stopping. But while I was thinking of this, my sweet Jesus moved in my interior and told me, "My daughter, do you want to always go around in my will? Oh, how gladly and with what love do I want you to go around, always, in my will. Your soul will be the wheel. My will wind you to make you rotate fast without ever stopping. Your intention will be the point of origin from which you want to start. Whatever way you want to take, whether in the past or in the present, or whether you want to delight along future paths, it is your free choice. You will always be dear to me, and you will give me highest delight, whatever the starting point you choose." Then he added, "Dearest daughter of my will, the work of my will contains the creative power. See, all that my humanity did while being upon earth, since everything was done in the supreme volition, contains this creative power in everything. So much so that just as a sun is always in act, always full of light and of heat, without ever decreasing or increasing in its full splendor, as it was created by God, in the same way, everything I did is all in act. And just as the sun is of all and of each one, in the same way my work, while being one, is of all and of each one. Even more, my thoughts form a crown to each created intelligence. My gazes, my words, my works, my steps, my heartbeats, my pains, become crown of the gazes, of the words, of the works, of the pains, and so forth, of the creatures. I could say that, like a crown, I guard all that the creature does. Now, if the creature thinks in my will, the crown of my thoughts opens and encloses her thoughts. And so the creatures, taking part in the creative power, do before God and before all the office of my intelligence. In the same way, if you look, if you speak, if you think, if you pray, if you work in my will, my gazes, my words, my thoughts, my prayers, my works form the place in which to receive all these actions of yours, and forming one single crown, they do the office of my gazes and of my words, and so forth with all the rest. The souls who live in my will are my true repeaters, my inseparable images, portrayed within them and absorbed again in me, so that everything they do may carry the seal that these are my works, as they continue my own office. August 14th, 1926, Volume 19, Bitternesses of the Soul because of the news of the upcoming printing of the writings on the will of God. Words of Jesus in this regard. My poor heart swims in the sea of the bitternesses, of the privations of my sweet Jesus. If he comes at all, he is like a flash that escapes. And in that light of the flash I see the poor world, its grave evils, the bonds among nations which are binding themselves to one another in order to start wars and revolutions, and by doing this they draw the chastisements of heaven, but so grave as to destroy entire cities and peoples. O God, how great is the human blindness! But as the flash of his lovable presence ends, I remain in the dark more than before, with the thought of my poor brothers scattered in the hard exile of life. But this was not enough to fill my poor heart with intense bitternesses. Something else added to suffocate my poor existence with those roaring waves that overwhelm my poor soul. That is, the news of the upcoming printing of the writings on the most holy will of God, since our Monsignor Archbishop had given his approval, placing the imprimatur himself. But this was nothing. The most fatal blow to my poor soul has been the news that they were going to put not only what regarded the divine will, because after so much insistence from our Lord and the superiors, I had convinced myself that the glory of God required this, and miserable and little as I am, it is not for me to oppose what blessed Jesus wants. But they were going to put out for printing also the order that Jesus has kept with me and everything he has told me, also about the other virtues and circumstances. This was too painful for me, and I spoke out my reasons over and over again so that it would not be done. Then while I was so oppressed, my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, as though feeling the weight of my oppression, clasped me in his arms and, shaking me up, told me, "My daughter, what's the matter? What's the matter? Be cheered. I do not want you to be so oppressed. Instead of thanking me, you oppress yourself. You must know that, so that my supreme will might be known, I had to prepare things, dispose means, overwhelm the Archbishop with those acts of absolute dominion of my will, which man cannot resist. I had to make one of my great prodigies. Do you think it is easy to obtain the approval of a bishop? How hard it is, how many quibbles, how many difficulties. And if they approve at all, it is with many restrictions, almost removing the most beautiful shades, the most striking colors, from all that my goodness has revealed with so much love. Don't you see, then, the triumph of my will in the approval of the Archbishop, and therefore my great glory, and the great necessity that the knowledges about the supreme will become known, and like beneficial dew, dampen the ardor of passions? Like rising sun, my will dispels the darkness of the human will, and removes the torpor which almost all creatures have, also in doing good, because the life of my will is missing. My manifestations about it will be like the balm which will heal the wounds produced by the human will. Those who will have the good of knowing them will feel a new life of light, of grace, of strength flow within them to fulfill my will in everything. Not only this, but in comprehending the great evil of their own will, they will abhor it and will shake themselves from the yoke, so very hard, of the human will, to place themselves under the gentle dominion of mine. Ah, you do not know nor see what I know and see. Therefore let me do it, and do not oppress yourself. Rather, you yourself should have urged and pushed the one whom I have disposed with so much love to take on this commitment. Even more, you should have told him to hurry and not to lose time. My daughter, the kingdom of my will is unshakable, and in these knowledges about it I have placed so much light, grace, and attraction as to render it victorious, in such a way that, as they become known, they will wage a sweet battle against the human will, and creatures will be conquered. These knowledges will be an immensely high and strong wall, more than the terrestrial Eden, which will prevent the enemy from entering in order to molest those who, conquered by it, will pass to live in the kingdom of my will. Therefore do not become disturbed, and let me do, and I will dispose everything so that the supreme fiat may be known. August 14th, 1932, Volume 31. One who does not live in the divine will finds himself in the conditions of the idol before the light of the sun. One who lives in it possesses the most holy Trinity in act. I was thinking about the divine will, and how one who lets herself be dominated by it, giving it full dominion, all rights are hers, and everything that the others obtain through pity, through mercy, through the goodness of God, she obtains by right. By right she obtains sanctity, because what dominates her is holy and has the virtue of transforming soul and body into sanctity, into goodness, into love. So all victories, conquests, rights are hers, and as owner she takes heaven by storm. What a great difference between one who lives in the divine will and one who lives by human will. But while I was thinking of this, my adorable Jesus, repeating his brief little visit, told me, "Blessed daughter, the difference between one and the other is great and incalculable. For one who does not live in my will, it is as the sun for the idol. For however much it invests them with its light and darts them with its heat, they do nothing, they learn nothing, and they earn nothing. And they render the light of the sun sterile for themselves. And since they are doing nothing, they are tired. They become bored by the same light, and they seek darkness as rest for their unhappy idleness. Instead, for one who works, the light is operating. It is light to the eye, in order to let her see what she must do. But for however much light is on the outside, if her eye does not have the life of the light that surrounds her will be of no use. And if she does not have the external light, the life of the light in her eye will be of no use. My paternal goodness has placed such union of accord between external light, the creature, and that of her eye, that one cannot operate without the other. Light to the hands if she wants to work, if she wants to write, if she wants to read, and so forth. So the first part works in the creature. She takes the light. Without it, it would be almost difficult for her to be able to do any good, or be able to earn a crust of bread in order to live. Now such is the light of my will for one who does not live in it. It invests all and exists for all, but it is neither operating nor dominating in the act of the creature. This one, with all its light, remains idle. He does not learn anything about the divine, nor can he make any conquest, and the most beautiful things tire and annoy him. The will that wants to live in mine is as the eye full of light, that makes itself capable of uniting with the light of my will, that placing themselves in accord, does and forms labors and prodigious works as to amaze heaven and earth. See, therefore, what living in my will means. To not be idle. The little light of the soul harmonizes with the light of the eternal fiat, in order to render it operating in her acts, and thus forming the inseparability between the one and the other. Then a crowd of thoughts followed in my mind about the divine will, and my celestial Jesus added, "Blessed daughter, My will produces light in the soul. Light generates knowledge. Light and knowledge love each other and generate love. So where my supreme will reigns, the sacrosanct Trinity reigns in act. Our adorable divinity carries by nature, in an irresistible way, to generate continually, without interruption, and the first generative act we do in ourselves. The Father continually generates me, and I, his Son, feel myself continually generated in him. The Celestial Father generates me and loves me. I am generated, and I love him. And from the one and the other, love proceeds. In this generative act, without ceasing, all our admirable knowledges, our secrets, our beatitudes, times, our dispositions, our power and wisdom are enclosed. All that eternity encloses is in a single generative act that forms all the union of our divine being. Therefore, this reciprocal love of ours forms the third person of our Supreme Being, inseparable from us. It seems that it is not content with our generative act in us, but wants to generate outside of us, in souls. And here is the task we entrust to our will, animated by our love, that it descend into souls and form with its light our divine generation. But it can do this only in one who lives in our volition. Outside of it, there is no place to form our divine life. Our word would not find the hearing to be listened to, and lacking our knowledges, love would not find the substance in order to generate. Here, then, is our most holy Trinity thrown into disorder in the creature. So only our will is what can form this divine generation of ours. Therefore be attentive to listen to what this light wants to tell you, in order to give the field to its generative act. End of August 14th. Fiat.